Hi, my name's Craig Brown, and I'm responding to the question about creating an information intensive environment in my high school art class, how I would do that and why that's important. So I think to begin with, one of the ways of looking at what an information intensive environment is to think about the content that we are learning. That's part of our regular classroom content being introduced and experienced as through listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And so that means combining the sort of support materials in each step with the instruction and discussion. Now, maybe there is a checklist of materials that the students are using that they're taking back to their group to engage in a project. Well, the checklist, we have a written document. Something that is a checklist is something that would be agreed upon by the whole group. So you have a discussion about, what is the condition of the paintbrush, and then that, of course, is supported by the written document itself. Of course, with all instructions, we would have clear written instructions in addition to an oral explanation of what that would be. Stations for doing different procedures, cleanup, putting primer and gesso down on canvas, so on and so forth, that would each come with instructions in various forms, both in full class demonstrations, in written form, and in spoken discussion as people are engaging with the station. So for even just for our normal class procedures and our normal class content, I think that there are ways to increase the intensity of the information by having it be experienced simultaneously through these four different modes. And so in addition, I think that creating an information intensive environment means giving students access to information that is outside of the content that we're normally that I'll be teaching directly. And so I would do that by creating accessible and dense stations of information, both in the physical space and in the shared digital space. So this might be a library of art books located in class, which I think is in some ways more accessible than a library of books might be in other subjects, because the way in which people interact with and read art books is a kind of image first approach where they're looking for images that conform to the kind of work that they want to be doing, the colors they want to be using, so on and so forth. And then that's accompanied by text, which then they can read. It's a bit more like interacting with an encyclopedia than it is a piece of literature. And of course, in the digital space, computers and tablets with bookmarks for, say, the Metropolitan Museum of Art's online collection, which is very accessible and easily searchable and has millions of works of art along with accompanying descriptions and relevant information. Sometimes it might be as simple as like just boxes of discarded, bizarre old magazines. Maybe that's what they want to interact with, which again, you are finding visually interesting or relevant information. You're dissecting that, maybe sometimes literally by cutting it out and looking at the accompanying texts and descriptions or seeing how things are juxtaposed together, which is the basis for, could be the basis for verbal discussion, either in group or in critique as well. Another part of it, which I think doesn't often happen in art class, would be the organizing of discussion into text. So a lot of times points are made, things are said, but they are not made concrete and not necessarily made concrete to everyone in class. And part of that is because they're not written down, and then they're not accessible at a later point. So I think that having a simple journal that's following around every student, where they are writing what the task is, what their goal is in relation to the task, and then maybe what their approach would be. It could be just simple jotted notes that cover those details, and then that could be the basis for them to discuss with their partner, hear some additional views, both before and after they try out what it is that they want to do, the approach that they want to take. And then they can simply jot notes on the progress of that. And I think that that aspect is really important, especially for iterative design. And iterative design is really central to creating all artwork. So I think that it's something that's not always implemented that could be implemented in a class, and would benefit students. Another thing that's not often implemented that I think could be implemented would be a simple writing down on a whiteboard and connecting ideas that as they're being discussed in group discussion in a critique. I haven't really seen that done, but I think it would be very useful, especially because it can be difficult for people who are not following the discussion well to get anchored in the discussion in a critique. I mean, you can try to solve that by calling on different people, but when everything is this floating cloud of oral language, it can be difficult, especially if somebody's mind wanders, to get back into what is being said, or to connect to points that were made previously when they're not remembering what happened previously, or they were thinking about what they wanted to say about some other artwork while somebody else was talking or whatever. And so I think that simply writing out the discussion as it happens, tracking it in a mind map or whatever on a whiteboard, something simple like that would be very useful. And then all of this information, whether it's the stuff in the journal, the mind map, in the class discussion, especially once it's in a written form, can be posted online. And then you start to build a repository of all this information that you're generating in class, which then itself becomes a resource. And that could be a resource of written language. It could be oral language and recordings of things, or links out to relevant information on all of those things: images, verbal language, artist interviews, or whatever might be relevant to that. So I think that there are lots of opportunities, especially in art class, to create an information intensive environment. And I think it's also really critical to having a successful art class so that you're engaging people with, well, basically how they should engage with ideas, rather than just teaching people what the ideas are.